4,500 years ago, before cranes, before engines, before steel tools, human beings stood in the Egyptian desert and attempted something that still feels impossible today. They decided to build a mountain. Not a natural mountain. A mountain made by hand, stone by stone. The Great Pyramid of Giza would rise more than 140 meters into the sky, built from millions of blocks, some weighing several tons. And the strangest part? The people who built it had no trucks, no hydraulic machinery, no computer-designed blueprints, and no modern surveying equipment. Yet the structure they created survived pharaohs, wars, earthquakes, grave robbers, and more than 40 centuries of desert winds. So how did they do it? And could the answer be even more impressive than the mystery? Today, the pyramids appear almost isolated in the desert. But during their construction, this place would have looked completely different. Thousands of people moved across the plateau. Stone cutters, boat crews, carpenters, surveyors, bakers, rope makers, architects, doctors, and enormous teams of laborers. The Great Pyramid was not simply a building. It was a national project. A massive machine made not from metal, but from people. Stand next to one of these stones and the mystery becomes easier to understand. A typical block could weigh several tons. Some stones used inside the pyramid were dramatically heavier. Imagine moving even one of them without a truck. Now imagine moving thousands. And then imagine repeating that process again and again for years. This is where theories about aliens, lost technology, and supernatural forces are born. Because looking at the finished pyramid makes it easy to forget something important. The Egyptians did not build it in a day. They solved the problem one step at a time. Before the first block could rise, the ground had to be prepared. Egyptian surveyors needed to establish an enormous square base and orient it with extraordinary accuracy. They used simple tools: ropes, wooden rods, plumb lines, observation of the sky, and generations of accumulated mathematical knowledge. No laser levels, no satellites. Yet the pyramid's sides were laid out with remarkable precision. That tells us something immediately. This was not chaotic labor. There were engineers here. There were planners. There was organization. Then came the stone. Much of the limestone used for the core could be quarried near the construction site. Workers attacked the rock using tools available in ancient Egypt. Stone pounders, copper tools, wooden levers, and enormous amounts of human effort. The work would have been brutal. Day after day, under the Egyptian sun, teams cut channels around sections of limestone until blocks could finally be separated. But cutting the block was only the beginning. Because once you had a multi-ton stone sitting in a quarry, you still had to move it. And here, ancient Egyptian art gives us one of the most fascinating clues. Workers could place heavy objects on wooden sledges and pull them with ropes. But dragging a huge sledge across dry sand creates a problem. The sand piles up in front. So what happens if you add water? The sand can become firmer. The sledge slides more efficiently. A technique surprisingly simple and surprisingly clever. Instead of defeating physics, the Egyptians learned how to work with it. Dozens of men pulling together could move loads that would be impossible for a single person. Multiply that cooperation across thousands of workers, and suddenly the impossible begins to look possible. Not every stone came from beside the pyramid. Higher quality limestone and other materials had to travel much farther. And Egypt already had the perfect highway. The Nile. Large stone blocks could be loaded onto boats and transported by river and canals toward the Giza plateau. Think about that. The pyramid was not just a construction project. It required an entire logistics network. Quarries sending stone, boats carrying material, crews unloading it, teams moving it inland, food arriving for workers, tools constantly being repaired, ropes constantly being replaced. The pyramid began long before the stone reached the pyramid itself. And where did all those people live? Near the pyramids, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of settlements associated with the workers. There were places for preparing food, sleeping, storage, and administration. Bread and beer were produced in enormous quantities. Workers needed calories. A hungry workforce cannot build a monument. This evidence also challenges the popular Hollywood image of endless rows of chained slaves. The reality appears more complicated. The workforce included organized labor groups, specialists, craftsmen, and rotating workers. These people were not simply dragging stones. They were operating one of the largest organized construction projects in the ancient world. And when night came, the sky itself became a tool. The ancient Egyptians carefully observed the stars. By tracking celestial movements and using simple surveying techniques, builders could establish direction and alignment. Imagine standing on the Giza plateau thousands of years ago. No city lights. No aircraft. No modern skyline. Only darkness, the stars, and the outline of a monument beginning to rise from the desert. To the Egyptians, this was more than architecture. The pyramid connected the king, the land, and the heavens. Eventually the foundation disappeared beneath layer after layer of stone. And now came the greatest problem of all. Moving blocks horizontally was difficult. But how do you move them upward? The higher the pyramid grew, the harder the problem became. This is where we enter the biggest engineering mystery of the Great Pyramid. The ramps. And the truth is, we still do not know exactly what the final system looked like. Some form of ramp system was almost certainly important. But there are several possibilities. A straight ramp. Ramps wrapping around sections of the pyramid. Zigzagging ramps. Or combinations that changed as construction progressed. A gigantic straight ramp reaching all the way to the summit would require an extraordinary amount of material. So many researchers suspect the builders adapted their methods as the pyramid grew. Instead of one magical technique, there may have been many. Picture the scene. A heavy limestone block sits on a wooden sledge. A team grips the ropes. An overseer coordinates the movement. The ramp is prepared. Water may be applied where necessary. Then comes the command. Pull. Every person leans forward. The ropes tighten. The stone shifts. Centimeter by centimeter, the block climbs. Not dramatic by modern standards. But repeat this process thousands upon thousands of times, and a mountain begins to rise. Once a stone reached the correct level, brute force was no longer enough. It had to be positioned. Workers could use wooden levers to shift blocks incrementally. Lift one side. Insert support. Move again. Adjust. Measure. Repeat. We often imagine ancient technology as primitive. But simple technology does not mean ineffective technology. A lever is simple. A rope is simple. A ramp is simple. But used together by trained workers, they can move astonishing loads. Then came the craftsmen. A poorly shaped stone could create problems for every layer above it. So blocks needed to be dressed and adjusted. Masons worked surfaces with tools, measuring again and again. This is one of the secrets behind monumental construction. The pyramid was not built by one genius. It was built by specialists. Different teams solved different problems. One group quarried. Another transported. Another measured. Another shaped the stone. Another placed it. Organization was itself a technology. But while the pyramid grew outward, another construction project was happening inside. Passages, chambers, shafts, massive internal spaces buried beneath millions of tons of stone. Inside these corridors, there was little room to work. Lighting was difficult. Airflow was limited. Every measurement mattered. A mistake made here could later become impossible to repair. The builders had to know where chambers would exist before layers of stone sealed them away. And then there are the enormous granite elements used in parts of the interior. Some were transported from hundreds of kilometers away. These were not ordinary blocks. Moving them demanded planning on an entirely different level. Teams had to transport them by water, move them onto the plateau, maneuver them through the construction site, and eventually raise them into the structure. Whatever precise methods were used, this was not accidental. The builders understood weight, balance, leverage, and sequence. They knew that certain stones had to arrive at exactly the right stage of construction. Throughout the build, surveyors continued checking the structure. Is the face still straight? Is the angle correct? Are the corners aligned? Has one section risen too high? Tiny errors at the bottom become huge errors at the top. So the pyramid had to be continuously corrected as it climbed. It was the ancient equivalent of quality control. Except the product was a monument weighing millions of tons. The rough structure most tourists see today is not how the Great Pyramid originally appeared. Its exterior was once covered with smooth, fine limestone casing. Imagine the pyramid under the Egyptian sun, not brown and weathered, but bright, clean, and reflective. A gigantic geometric form glowing above the desert. Workers carefully fitted these outer stones together, creating the final surface of the monument. The pyramid was not only enormous. It was designed to be beautiful. Now look down from the pyramid. The true achievement becomes obvious. Below you are thousands of workers. Storage yards, quarries, workshops, food preparation areas, boats arriving from the Nile, teams carrying tools, teams carrying stone, supervisors coordinating labor, messengers moving between groups. This is why focusing only on the stones misses the real story. The greatest machine used to build the pyramid was the society surrounding it. After years of construction, the summit finally approached. The work area became smaller. The ramps became more difficult. Every new block had fewer places to stand around it. And eventually the pyramid reached its final height. After millions of individual actions, pulling ropes, cutting stone, delivering bread, measuring angles, repairing tools, rowing boats, the shape imagined years earlier finally stood above Egypt. But the job still was not finished. The mountain had to become a monument. Now came the finishing work. Casing stones were refined. Surfaces were smoothed. Edges were adjusted. Scaffolding surrounded parts of the monument, as skilled workers transformed the rough structure beneath into a clean geometric surface. This is perhaps the easiest part of the pyramid to underestimate. Building something large is difficult. Building something large and precise is much harder. One by one, the exterior stones were positioned. Teams pulled. Others pushed. Others measured. Small adjustments could take hours. Maybe longer. The goal was not simply to make the stone stay in place. It had to become part of the line. Part of the angle. Part of the illusion that the entire pyramid was one perfect form. And finally came the top. We do not know every detail of how the pyramid's summit was finished. But imagine the moment. Workers standing high above the desert. The Nile visible in the distance. Villages reduced to tiny shapes. After years of labor, there is almost nowhere left to climb. The final summit stones are positioned. The structure closes into a point. And the Great Pyramid is complete. Measurements would have been checked. Lines inspected. Work reviewed. Because this building was not intended to survive for a decade. It was built for eternity. And astonishingly, in a sense, it succeeded. Kingdoms disappeared. Languages changed. Empires conquered Egypt. Religions rose and fell. But the pyramid remained. Deep inside, silence would eventually replace the sound of workers. Chambers once filled with footsteps, hammering, ropes, and shouted instructions became dark. Still. Hidden. Stone corridors were sealed. Some passages would remain unseen for generations. And from that silence came legends. Secret rooms. Curses. Unknown technologies. Lost knowledge. The builders may have blocked or sealed certain passages, as part of the monument's design. Once enormous stones were moved into place, there was no easy way back. Think about the psychology of that moment. Years spent constructing a space, only to deliberately close it. After the workers disappeared, the pyramid kept its secrets. And when future generations looked at it without seeing the construction process, the questions began. Were the builders using lost technology? Were they helped by beings from another world? Were supernatural forces involved? Those ideas make incredible stories. But the archaeological evidence points to something arguably more extraordinary. Human beings. Workers. Engineers. Craftsmen. Sailors. Administrators. People solving enormous problems using tools that seem simple to us today. There is no credible evidence that aliens built the Great Pyramid. And we do not need aliens to make the story amazing. Because imagine seeing it when it was new. The limestone exterior shining under the sun. Its peak towering over everything nearby. No skyscrapers. No airplanes. No massive modern cities. Just a brilliant white monument emerging from the desert. For someone living 4,500 years ago, it must have looked almost impossible. Almost supernatural. And perhaps that was exactly the point. The pyramid was not only meant to contain the dead. It was designed to communicate power, order, divine kingship, permanence. Thousands of people participated in creating something no single person could have built. Their individual names are mostly lost. But their work is still standing. So how did the Egyptians build the pyramids? Not with one secret machine. Not with one miraculous trick. And based on the evidence we have, not with aliens. They did it with planning. Mathematics. Boats. Ramps. Sledges. Ropes. Levers. Stone tools. Skilled craftsmen. And an extraordinary ability to organize human effort on a massive scale. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Not how impossible the pyramids were, but how much ancient humans were capable of when thousands of people worked toward one goal. 4,500 years later, most of their cities are gone. Their wooden tools are gone. Their voices are gone. But the mountain they built is still here. And it is still asking us the same question. How did they do it? The answer was never magic. The answer was human ingenuity.